Good evening, everybody. First of all, I would like to express my sincere condolences for the death of Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and I extend my sympathy to the people of the United Arab Emirates and paying tribute to his distinguished and far-sighted leadership in the service of the nation. And also, I would like to congratulate the people of UAE for the election of Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan as the ruler and the new president of UAE. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I'm honored to present Al-Multaqa literally today. The Multaqa Salon participated in Abu Dhabi International Fair this year, 2022, in 5 sessions. We had the last 2 days with 4 elite couples in discussing their literature, novels, and children's stories and poetry. Today, we will be talking in this session, totally different dimension, more technical and engineering perspective. I'm honored to introduce to you today the Herd family. Today, Frauke and David. You're most welcome. Can you please welcome them, please? Today's session is about history, engineering, and love for the desert. How a historian lived with an oil engineer away from their world, and how they settled in the witnesses of desolated desert, embarking on a journey that both of them did not expect to extend more than half a century until they became symbols and witnesses for a unique development experience in the Emirates. Frauke, Dr. Frauke Herd, she studied history and political science in Heidelberg. I hope I'm pronouncing it properly because it's a German word. And Berlin. She received her PhD from the Freie University of West Berlin in 1967 and followed her husband David to Abu Dhabi in the same year. In 1969, Frauke joined the Center of Documentation and Research in Abu Dhabi in Al-Qasr Al-Husn. The center specialized in collecting archiving material about the Gulf. Frauke was in the center for 39 years while it moved to a purpose-built place, but therefore institution became a national archive in 2014. Frauke published several books and many papers, extensively in English and German language. David Herd studied at Moncton Combe School in Bath in UK in 1958 and holds a degree of geology and physics from University of Cale, Staffordshire, UK. In 1963, he worked in Abu Dhabi Petroleum Company from 1963 till 2004, occupying different posts: petroleum engineer, involved in drilling, well testing, and etc., which is other jobs related to. Dealing with Petroleum Department, Ministry and ADNOC, representative Abu Dhabi Petroleum Company in Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi Petroleum Company, an advisor to Abu Dhabi Petroleum. He was decorated by Queen Elizabeth as an officer of the Order of the British Empire in 1990 and commander of the Order of the British Empire. David also had several books, and one of the famous back From Pearl to Oil that we will definitely let you to explore more and see your passion of the Gulf. So, my question here, Mr. David and Frauke, as you have been in the UAE for over 50 years, and you have witnessed the impressive and unprecedented success in economic, social, and scientific and technological development in the country with both Sheikh Zayed and Sheikh Khalifa. May they both rest in peace. Can you please collaborate on Sheikh Khalifa's vision, values, and legacy? And at the same time, tell us about the excellent relationship between him and his people as a ruler and as well as with other countries around the world. We appreciate if you can expand and give us some of the vision on that. Thanks.
Well, good evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you for... Where is Asma? Thank you for inviting us. There she is. I knew she couldn't be far away. Yes, we are very fortunate, both of us, to have been here together for so long. Actually, I think I would like to say that I came in the time of, before Sheikh Zayed, in the time of Sheikh Shakbut. And he was indeed a great ruler, 38 years. Sheikh Zayed was ruler for 38 years, which is remarkable and very, very similar and yet different people. And I think we respect the Nahyan family, and we should... My time goes back beyond Sheikh Zayed. Of course, it was a wonderful year in 1966, and the 6th of August was a wonderful day, because that was the day that Sheikh Shakbut decided to go to Bahrain and on to Beirut in due course. And Sheikh Zayed took over, and things really started to move. I mean, things had been moving under Sheikh Shakbut, but very slowly and sometimes reluctantly, whereas Sheikh Zayed was very much more a man of the people, someone who was much more charismatic. And I think you mentioned Sheikh Khalifa, and we should mention Sheikh Khalifa, because I think Sheikh Khalifa, in a very much quieter way, was also very charismatic. You
had definitely, I mean, witnessed all their life, and witnessed a lot of issues related to the petroleum development, economy, which I'm sure you had also a role of that. So if you can explore and expand on that, please.
I can tell you a little bit. First of all, of course, the first oil people came here in 1935, but the big agreement was with Sheikh Shakbut in 1939, and that was, of course, not much happened because of the World War until 1946, and then the shortage of steel and materials and everything delayed things further. But in 1937, Sheikh Zayed did accompany a geological survey party which set out from Abu Dhabi to go westwards. They got about 50, 60 kilometers west from here when they got hopelessly stuck in the Sabqa. In those days you could. There's no lovely asphalted roads like today. And so they had to turn around and come back. And they then mounted their cars onto boats, dhows, and took them over to the west. But Sheikh Zayed was there as they got all the way to Khor al-Daid in the far west. Sheikh Zayed always followed the oil industry. When the first well was being drilled at Ras Sadr near Khor Ghanada on the way to Dubai, before the border with Dubai. He used to come frequently to see what was going on, to check up on everything. And at this camp that the company had there, you have to remember, Abu Dhabi was empty, apart from a small town and a few people here and there in the desert. And there were people in the desert, but basically it looked like empty. And at this camp, they had very little in the way of facilities to amuse the men, but they did get a film from time to time, and it was shown on a wall, and people would sit in the sand. And Sheikh Zayed came along once, and he thought, that's fine. He went away, and he came back. He brought his mother with him to see the film, which was really rather lovely, the idea of his doing that. And from then on, of course, he didn't ever bring his mother again that I know of, but he was certainly involved and knew what was happening. Now, Sheikh Khalifa later was involved at a very different stage in the oil industry, where, it was much, much later, but I know too, and I mean, I remember going to his office what is now, I forget what they call the building, but it's near the Manhal Palace, opposite there. And I remember going there to discuss something with him. He was a quiet man, but he was also someone who was rather warm in feeling towards him and very welcoming. And I treasure the memory of the occasions when I was fortunate enough to be not too far away from him, as close as this or closer. Yes, well, we are both very fortunate. Frauke's here too, not me. I shouldn't do all the talking. She must have a go.
Frauke, yes, expand please, because you were fortunate also to be the partner with David, and you lived some of the successful stories. So if you can expand on that, please.
Well, I certainly.
If you can take it up.
These problems always with the communication. Yes, I'm very lucky to to have had more than 5 decades of living together, and all of it in Abu Dhabi. People often ask why I came to Abu Dhabi. Well, here is the reason, sitting here. Yes, we experienced together a change in a country or in a place in the world which has changed more than anywhere else in the world. And we can say, I don't like normally all these maximum best and so on, but in this case one really has to say this is a country that is has undergone such dramatic changes, and so has the society, and yet the society has somehow stayed knitted together and intact, the local society, and we can see that all of us expatriates, and they are the biggest majority of people living here, somehow blend in. It all is very harmonious. And we have had this privilege to witness this change, and also in my case be in a position to somehow also convey what one experiences to other people by writing about what one sees and how things have changed and how they have developed. And as a historian and political scientist, one has had the privilege really to be both an observer and a transmitter. And when you asked about our knowing about the leaders, Sheikh Zayed and Sheikh Khalifa, I think one has been able to observe that initially, I came in '67, Sheikh Zayed had just been the ruler for 1 year, so things were very much in the beginning. So initially, one could see, and one knew even before the federation was put together, that Sheikh Zayed, of course, he concentrated on Abu Dhabi. And that was his concern, to be a father for people who were expecting a difference in their lives in a very short time. Sheikh Zayed concentrated on Abu Dhabi, and then we all know how it came about that the federation was created. And once the UAE was inching its way on the world stage, this was a calling for Sheikh Zayed and the people around him. He had some people who were with him. I would say they were, not only advising, but they were also carrying out what Sheikh Zayed's ideas and visions were. They contributed visions to all of this, but much of it had to be in relationship to the UAE's position first in the nearer neighborhood, the Arab countries, and then in the bigger, wider world. And at that point, it was Sheikh Khalifa who then was not only in charge of the town of Abu Dhabi, but also that I think was his interest and his passion. And we can cite many of the foundations and initiatives that came in Sheikh Khalifa's time, that was his thing. Abu Dhabi was his thing, the Khalifa Foundation and the initiatives for young people, and so one could really see that both father and son were pulling together, and yet everyone had their field of operation and their field of looking after all of us.
Thank you, Frauke. I mean, Frauke, to extend to this question, you've been taking place in documentation center, historical documentation center. So when you started there as a documentation, obviously there was a lot of the document that was scattered. And I think as a section, as a person working in this department, you had a major role. So can you expand on that? I mean, and how much you can started to collect all the documents of UAE?
Well, when I started there wasn't all that much. I started to really, I tumbled across a place where somebody had told me that there were some books and some articles and some things that could instruct me about this region. I had come straight from university, I had just finished my PhD, was in the process of publishing this book, my PhD as a book. So my next project, so to speak, was to understand the society and the environment where I lived. And that meant to get an understanding of what, for instance, what exactly is an Arab tribe or tribes, or how the society is structured, and what is it when people are Muslims? What is Islam? What does it mean for society, and maybe for me as well, for us? And what is also the economy of a society that is just now looking towards a very different income level as far as the government is concerned. And all of this I wanted to find out more. And then I was told that there was this place in the old fort that somebody was putting together material, and that somebody was Dr. Mohammed Morsi Abdallah, who was the, then for 30 years, the director of this center, which had started in one room in the old fort, and its mission was to collect material about really the situation of Abu Dhabi and the crucial states in its surroundings. Because so far, there had been, with the political changes from the British government wanting to withdraw from the Gulf, there had been, it had become obvious that there might have been some border problems and discussions of that kind. And in order to be able to participate in such discussions, one couldn't just say, our people have been there, and they, dug these wells, and they had their camels here and there. You need written evidence. And that was really what this center was all about in the beginning, to collect written evidence about
as much as you can,
the situation of the UAE in this environment. And from there, we collected eventually material from many nations, from other nations' archives, like the British, which had the collection of the Indian Company, East India Company. We collected from Dutch, from Portuguese, from French, German, Russian, from the Vatican, and all of this over many years. And in this process, the center grew from this one room with the three of us to a place which in 1998 1998, 30 years after the center was founded. In 98, this center had occupied or used the entire Kassalhossen, the old part, the new part, the renovated part, and so on. And then we were told to move out and move somewhere else. And that's then eventually ended up as the National Archive. But that is, in short, the history of the Center for Documentation and Research.
Okay, before I go to the guest here, I would have here one more question. As both of you had a passion of the desert and you've been here in the region, as an elite professional couple, you both wrote several books about UAE and the Gulf also. Tell us, please, how you do it. I mean, under one umbrella, we say, mashallah, you're doing all these books. Do you discuss your writing together? Do you proofread each other? Do you analyze for each other book? How do you do it? Simply, I think, David, if you can give us a briefly, and then Frauke. Highly appreciate that. Let us know the secret.
How do we do it? I wonder sometimes too. Yes. Oh, by the way, before I say anything else, I would like to say that I'm delighted that our daughter and her husband, Teresa and David, have come to listen. I thought they heard enough of us when they come and visit us at home, but it's lovely to see that they've come here. Thank you for coming. Teresa was born in Abu Dhabi. Yes, how do we do it?
Well, if your father didn't tell us the secret, then you have to tell us. Maybe you would know.
Yes, the amount of cooperation varies enormously from day to day or month to month. There are times when we get deeply involved with one another's work, and there are times when we don't get involved at all. It depends to a certain extent on things like mood. It depends on the context. It depends on what other things we're doing.
Do you accept the Frauke's analysis? Or proofreading, or whatever you can?
I don't think I've ever disputed it. That doesn't necessarily mean I accept it, but I say I don't dispute it.
I must maybe add that, as you all realize, I'm German, and I still have a tinge of the accent. When I first started to write in English and publish, I think I made as long sentences as one does in German. And David saw it as his mission to cut these sentences. And with certainly all my first publication, the first book and other publications, nothing was sent to print, which David had not looked over and commented. At the same time, I must say that he very, very rarely disputed what the content or what I had written. It was simply the sentences and sometimes a turn of phrase or whatever. It was technical rather than the input. Except maybe once or twice, we actually, recently, we did cooperate in something that was a real cooperation. The review of one book which was published in 3 volumes. So it was some 1,000 and something rather pages. And I sort of did the draft, and then we completed it together. That was a real cooperation. But otherwise, now David works very much on his own, and I am amazed and looked over, and I often have a suggestion of how to structure things and where to put what and the structure rather than
I have to add that Frauke wrote her first book with pencil and paper and rubber, and that was the way it was in those days. And so, of course, you also had a bit more time to perhaps think things through more carefully. And but I didn't really have much to change.
Yeah,
the thing was that you also, being very German, you put the verb at the end of the sentence, or the end of the paragraph. And I found this a little bit difficult, hunting for the verb. But then, now I'm reading a German novel in which the sentences run to sometimes a paragraph, which could be 6 or 8 or 10 lines, and then you're still searching for the verb as you go through it, and there you find it at the end. It's a very strange language, this.
But I think I have, sort of learned to abandon a little bit this particular German way of writing, or speaking for that matter. Yeah, but maybe to get back to how we wrote books in the past. As David said, it was on very long, big paper, lined paper I used, and pencil, and then drafted it, and then typed myself. I typed the first draft of a chapter, and then it went over it again, and then got someone, in fact, in the end, who typed the second draft or a third draft, and so on. And then eventually this was sent to London, to Longmans, and they had comments and shifted the chapters around sometime. So altogether, this first book took 10 years to publish, which nowadays you just, I mean, this is unheard of. People sit down with their computer and they write a book in, well, some people in a very short time, which maybe is not worth reading. But the production of a book was maybe also more concentrated, and therefore also the input of the publisher. Very often, publishers really had an idea of what a book should look like and be like, and what the content should look like. So there was much more coming and going between the author and the publisher, whereas nowadays the publisher actually just sees that it goes quickly enough. And next one, please. Maybe I'm doing injustice to, but certainly it has to be print ready from your computer, and you can do it, and it's not magic, and therefore, you know, I participate in this now. It's all much easier technically, not in the mind.
You did say something about the desert a few minutes ago.
Well, I believe both of you have. I mean, I just wanted to keep a question for the audience, because otherwise we're limited with time. But obviously, I mean, both of you have a passion of desert, and I think staying you here in this country all these years, this is one of the things that you were sharing together. So if you can give us about the magic of the desert and this part of the world, and how you felt on that, I mean, when you came here, and how actually, what did you had an idea when you were there, and when you come here? I mean, please explore on that.
Well, I think one couldn't really say that one had a passion for the desert in the first years. It was when you, more or less, when you left the house, in our case, right behind the compound where the 36 bungalows had been built by the oil company, right behind was a dune between, what one would say, between a Corniche and Batin. And it was a dune on which was the one water tank, because it was a bit higher. The desert was coming in. We were not going out to the desert. It was there, and couldn't be avoided. And the few times when people actually crossed the Magda Bridge, you were in the desert. We were extremely lucky. I was at 3 weeks or after I had arrived in Abu Dhabi. We actually were invited to go with someone, with a group from David's company. Some people got together, all in these old little Land Rovers, to go around at an Eid. There was Eid, holiday, and New Year. It was on this at the same time, so that ended up with 5 days holiday, and which the company had given. Anyway, one was able to explore and drive around all the 5 crucial states, and that was at a time when there was no tarmac no tarmac road anywhere, except 15 kilometers between Dubai and Sharjah. And we had homemade maps, copies from geological maps and so on, which we put on sandwich paper. Anyway, we went, I think we were about 10 of us or so in 4 Land Rovers, went all the way to Dubai, Sharjah, and so on, and then over to the East Coast. And therefore, I must say that right from the beginning, one had an idea that this whole place was not just Abu Dhabi town. There was a hinterland that was just ready to be explored. And there was another magic place which very few people had explored at all. In fact, the Diva was myself with a French lady and some French cineasts were the first to go to the Liwa overland. The first female Europeans to get to the Liwa overland. Some had already, with the oil company, gone by plane and be put down in a Liwa and driven around and gone home again. But that was a magic place, and nobody had been. So, yes, we all wanted to go back to this place, and we have with our children, we had wonderful places which we would then always go back to. And yes, it was a passion for the desert, but it didn't. But it just came in. One didn't look for it, and
David,
to be so lucky to be able to drive there, and in fact, later have cars that one could manage to get to the desert, and we never did. Yes, one thing we hate the expression "that's a dune bashing." Because the word bashing in English, I don't know whether one generally realizes, but that's a very aggressive and very unfriendly word. So the dunes are beautiful and wonderful, and you feel, you destroy something even when you drive over. Thankfully, the wind, this sort of puts it all right again. But dune bashing is not what one should do. One should be grateful if one is maybe able to learn to drive over these dunes gently, if one wants to go from A to B. But to yak around in the desert just for, that's a footnote on my part, to
David,
this, loving the desert.
David, you came in '60s, so you've been between the drilling sites, petroleum, and desert. Did you expect that you will stay all these years?
Good heavens, no. When I came, I came obviously with a company, an oil company. Actually, you as an Iraqi would know the Iraq Petroleum Company. It's the same company here, the same group here. No, when I arrived in Jabal Dana, first that I saw of Abu Dhabi, we arrived at 9 o'clock in the morning on the 3rd or 4th of August, 1963, and the plane took off again and left the 3 of us standing there, and I looked around, and there was the post with a windsock on it, and there over there, way away over there were the deserts, and there was just this flat plain, and there over there in the distance was the sand, and no one to say, welcome to Abu Dhabi. Anyway, but later I was driving through the desert quite a lot, obviously going to different oil wells, places, and sometimes one would stop, sometimes one had to sit and wait, and I think one of the really enjoyable things that I had was when you could sit and wait and look around, just wander around in the desert, or go out early in the morning from a camp and see what's happened during the night. Because in the late afternoon, the wind would get up and the sand would all be smoothed, rippled but smoothed, and then all the little creatures would come out in the night and do what little creatures do in the night. And you go out early in the morning, you see the fresh tracks. And then the wind kindly comes in the late afternoon, and the next day you have another lot of fresh tracks. And then also sitting there in the silence, the wonderful silence. And I can remember sitting there, and when finally that truck, with a big smoke cloud coming out of the top perhaps as well, came round the dune, and the noise of it approaching and destroying that silence was really, well, I was relieved that it had come actually, because we had to get on with the job. But those days when you sat and waited, or another time when we were driving along with a friend of ours, and he was leading, and we were down somewhere between Elaine and the Lewa, before there were any tracks around there, and he suddenly stopped, or not stopped, he did a circle like that, and we thought, oh, he's mad, what's he doing? You know, we've got our eyes on that distant dune that's that shape, and we've got to get there, and we have to think of the country between and so on, and here he is just doing a circle. And I said to him afterwards, Culliffe, what are you doing? And he said, I saw the tracks of a hedgehog. I couldn't believe it.
While
but
he was
saw
driving.
the tracks, and he did a circle to have a look at them. So the desert has got all sorts of surprises in it, and we used to go camping so often. Nowadays, of course, if we ever get taken out to the desert, they have to do the work for us. But when they were small, we did all the work, and we had lovely days in the desert. Many camping places, favorite ones.
Any questions?
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mariam. It is my pleasure to see both of you on this stage, Dr. Frauke and Mr. David. My question is, for Frauke, you wrote a book about الإمارات المتصالحة. So what was the challenge? It was like when I read that book, it showed us that you were like, you sit closely with these people. You know all of the tribes that most of people, they don't know about it. So what was the challenge that you faced after publishing the book? And then this is about your book. And then if I go to Mr. David, you wrote a book about the pearl, from pearl to oil. And it was all of it about the petroleum sector. So when you are writing the same, it was like all of it about UAE or Abu Dhabi or whatever. So what was, again, the challenge that you faced after publishing the book? When starting, the people read the book about Emirat al-Mutasaliha, about the tribes. Is there some people, they said like, no, why you write about this tribe rather than this tribe or whatever? Did you challenge, as you have a challenge when you write something about the oil sector from pearl to oil? Thank you so much. And Mr. Sima, Ms. Sima, it was my pleasure having you here. Thanks.
Allah يخليك. So I guess Frauke, she's asking about about the tribes. How come you specified some tribes and not mentioning some others? Because somehow this was a challenge between the people who read the book. So what's your comments on that? صح؟ هذه
Oh, how do I know? How
you
do I know
collect
about
data,
these tribes?
how you do know?
You are working with him. We are with him. But
the theory.
Because she was
the theory that you expanded to how to collect all these data and you
about
started.
tribes.
Yes.
You know, it's like even these families. Sometimes they are not talking about this one, but you start to write all of these things. So it shows that you are closely sitting with them. So, you know, what was the challenge after you published the book?
You are asking how and why I know about these tribes and why I could even, write it down in such detail. There are maybe two answers to this question. One is that I had a written material that I could consult and go to, because particularly, and you find it in the footnotes, the reference to a major work it's called Lorimer's Gazette, and that was where somebody had the task given by the government of British India to put together knowledge about the people in the Gulf. and they had accumulated a lot of knowledge before, and his task was to put it all together. And where he didn't have enough knowledge, he actually got someone, particularly in the crucial states, to collect there and then more material. And that was in the early decade of the 20th century. And I consulted and used much of this material. But with this in hand, it was then possible for me to consult and go to people who were from this tribe or that tribe and ask them and ask whether, is it still like that? Why, why is this, do they still live in this particular part of Abu Dhabi and so on? So, and that was partly also why it was good that this book took such a long time to mature, because I had a chance to take my questions round and back and to other people, not only about tribes, but many other things, that I had a chance to accumulate and slowly fill up my basket of questions, so to speak. And in this case, certainly the skeleton of this particular chapter, the first chapter, is certainly from this Loremos Gazetteer, and you'll find the reference in the footnotes at the back.
David, Rhoda, she asked about From Pearls to Oil, your book. So
well, I'm afraid in my book there are no pearls and no oil, but I wanted a nice title. Of course, the basic source of information is the company archives, which are in the United Kingdom. They were in London, but they're not complete. The company archives are just files which people kept in the head office when they felt like or had to keep certain reports or letters or correspondence between London and here. It was Dubai or Sharjah, actually, in those days of that book. The files really are a bit bitty sometimes, because sometimes people were a bit careless, other people were more careful. Also, space in London is very expensive, and the files, when they got rather big, then people would throw stuff out. So it's a bit of a problem. But I was lucky that I did find an enormous amount of material, and then where there are gaps, I tried to fill them in with other sources, either books or anyway, wherever I could find anything. And that sort of helped a lot, and gave also, it helped to round the story. And I wanted also to write From Pearls to Oil in a way, because I'm not a historian. And I like to read a book that I enjoy reading rather than just for learning about things. And that's what I tried to do with From Pearls to Oil. That's why I've got a hero and his enemy.
okay, Nadia.
Good evening again. You came here in the 60s. I arrived in the 80s. One, of course, is proud and astonished and admires all the development in the country, but I do sense that there is a nostalgia somewhere for the old time and the old sceneries and the sand dunes and the life and the tribes. Am I right? Am I wrong? Do you feel that nostalgia for the UAE in the 60s, or?
Thank you, Nadia. That is a very interesting question, which is, I think, for all of us in some ways. I think everybody does have moments and has places and memories which are very nostalgic. And often it actually has to do with also one's, you remember where the young people have done what and so on. But in general, I think that we, at the same time, remember and cherish our memories of times when it was you know, was easier. Like an example, that there was a time in Abu Dhabi where you knew almost every owner of every car. And I remember that I stopped someone who was the Sudanese legal advisor to Sheikh Zayed, and I met him at a roundabout, which was just in the sand, a roundabout, but there was nothing on it. But anyway, we stopped and hopped out of the car and chatted, because one had... Yes, Saleh Farah, yes. Just as an example, I remember that one knew, not everybody, but it was that sort of small community. And yet, that's wonderful to remember, but on the other hand, it is now, I mean, one lives life is so easy here, and when I think, for instance, the facilities we now have in appreciating art, it's just it's a different world, a different life, and with Dubai being so close and yet being, you know, so different to Abu Dhabi and so on, one really does appreciate also the development that has brought all of us to this place where this country is firmly on the world map in so many respects, and be it artistic, political, economic, you name it. And to be part of that is certainly also a great joy, and to actually have in one's mind, and often also in one's writing and so on, both these extremes, that I can remember our journey up country without any roads and you know, driving along the beach, because that was the only flat place to move, and now, you know, going to the Louvre or a ballet, and that the process of change is also always uplifting, or one should always see the positive in it, and not only the negative.
Indeed.
Thank you for Mr. David and Dr. Frauke. Thank you for coming today and join Al-Multaqa. And it's really, you make our day today. It's you know how you are, your family near to us as nostalgia. She says nostalgia. You are our close friend, and the time is run. But I want to ask one question. It's what is still you didn't write it. You want to write. Yani one book you want to write it now about UAE. Which you want subject you want, because I know you make all your
agenda,
your articles, and now you're doing again. You make it in one book. Is it already you publish it, or still?
Yeah, it's not available here, but yes, it's published in English in Berlin, and it's available in Amazon. We have even the flyers here if anybody wants to have the particulars of these books that are not available here. You asked what I would like to write about.
Yes.
I think my next would probably be about the foreign relations of this country, the development of foreign relations with this country.
Okay.
Which was, when it was first, the UAE was put together in 1971. It even within the Arab world was very looked down upon, and one wondered, you know, whether the rest of the Arab world actually were happy with this new child. And how this has changed would be a fascinating study. Maybe I'll get round to it.
Did Mr. David will help you on that one? Because I think both of you have the relationship, and I think nice to put both of you to write this book.
Maybe we'll get round to it. Yeah.
There's always so much that one can write about. But I just wanted to add to a little bit of the nostalgic side of things. I have absolutely no nostalgia for driving through the desert in a hot car, driving through, grinding through the sand, second and third gear, just back down to second gear and roaring the way through. And it is so hot, no air conditioning. You've got the hot air blowing through, and you're perspiring all over the place. You're tired. Anyway, I have no nostalgia for that whatsoever. But I have for what happened when we got there or when we got back again. And those were great days when we were working out in the desert on the drilling rigs, or back in Tarif, or here back in Abu Dhabi, and among people. People are what makes the place. And the people of Abu Dhabi have always been so good with us. And back in the desert days when we were drilling back in the 1960s, and the people of Abu Dhabi were there too. I remember sitting on the dune with a young Abu Dhabi person, and we talked and talked and talked. He was working with the geologists because he was way ahead of many other people, and I wish I could talk to him today, but I have lost track of him many years ago.
I'd like at the end, unfortunately, we have a limited time, and obviously we exceeded our time. David, Frauke, heard very, very much. I mean, we appreciate it, honored having you with us, and thank you very much. Please, thank you for everything. Thank you for this lovely session. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Seema, for moderating this and getting us going, and thank you, Asma, for organizing this. And it is really wonderful that you are still giving your time to the book fair. And we remember fondly the salon, and we hope that it will come back.
It's our pleasure and honor.
Yes.
Our pleasure and honor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.